On January the 26th, 2009, following a severe, even a catastrophic financial crisis that had started in October 2008, the Independence Party announced through its leader, Prime Minister Mr. Geir Haarde in Iceland, that it would not continue its coalition with the Social Democratic Alliance. Mr. Haarde formally resigned as Prime Minister on February the 1st, 2009. He had initially been a popular Prime Minister. He had served earlier as Finance Minister from 1998 to 2005, then as Foreign Minister from 2005 to 2006, and following the announcement of Prime Minister Halldór Ásgrímsson's resignation in June 2006, he had been appointed as the new Prime Minister. So Iceland, like most European republics, is a parliamentary republic where the president is the country's ceremonial leader, but not the executive leader. That role belongs to the Prime Minister. So in October 2008, in less than a week, Iceland's three major commercial banks, Glitnir, Landsbanki and Kaupthing, all had to be taken over by the government as they were unable to roll over their loans. The similar kind of banking crisis had started in Finland in 1991, Finland being another Nordic country, by the way, and it also involved the taking over of certain banks and then the payment of tens of billions of Finnish marks at that time of the so-called bank support or bank subsidy. Iceland had until then been sheltered from the major global economic crisis that had begun, depending on the interpretation, either in 2007 or in early 2008. And anyway, after nearly 4 months of this crisis, as I said, on January the 26th, 2009, Prime Minister Haarde announced his resignation and left office formally on February the 1st, 2009. Only 3 days before his resignation announcement, he had told the country that due to health reasons, malignant esophageal tumor, he would step down as chairman of the center-right Independence Party at the next party congress, which was due to be held in the last week of March 2009. He was replaced by Mrs. Johanna Sigurdardóttir, who became the first openly homosexual Prime Minister of Iceland. She formed a left-wing coalition government and had formerly served as Social Affairs and Social Security Minister. In 2010, the Special Investigative Commission into Iceland's financial collapse strongly criticized former Prime Minister Haarde, accusing him of negligence along with 3 other members of his government. The Icelandic Parliament, Althing, voted 33 to 30 to indict only former Prime Minister Haarde in September 2010 on charges of negligence in office at a session. And he was then to stand trial before the Landsdómur, a special tribunal to hear cases alleging misconduct in government office. It was the first time since the 1905 Icelandic constitution was promulgated for this special court to be convened. Iceland had, by the way, become unilaterally independent of Denmark as a republic in 1944, while Denmark, the mainland Denmark, was still under the German occupation. In October 2011, Landsdómur voted to drop the first 2 charges against former Prime Minister Haarde concerning gross negligence and failure to have the financial risks assessed, but to continue with the case based on the 3 remaining and lesser charges. Mr. Haarde's party, the Independence Party, at its 40th National Convention in November 2011, strongly condemned these accusations, claiming that they constituted an abhorrent political trial. The trial began in Reykjavik, the Icelandic capital, in early March 2012, and Mr. Horthe was found guilty on 1 of 4 charges in late April 2012. The charge was not addressing the problems that Icelandic banks were facing or their potential consequences for Iceland's economy at the meetings of his cabinet or government. But since he at the time was 61 years old, had no previous criminal record, and since he had not been found guilty of the most serious charges, he was not sentenced in the case. The Icelandic state even paid his legal expenses. However, Mr. Horthe for some reason appealed the court's ruling, although he received no sentence and therefore no criminal record. As a matter of principle, to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, in November 2017, the court ruled against him. And here's one final note. Geir Horthe is called that way because his late father was a Norwegian immigrant, Thomas Horthe. So if he had decided to use the Icelandic patronymic last name system, he would have been called Geir Tómasson, but he decided not to be called. In Iceland, contrary to all the other countries that I know of, the people's official names, although the Arab countries do have this Abu something, and then traditional Jewish names, or at least the more modern Israeli names, have Ben this and that. I mean, yes, Abu means father, and then the person is called, and then Ben means son of someone in Arabic and Hebrew respectively. But in the Icelandic language, a man or a boy is called by his so-called last name, SSON. So for example, Mr. Horthe's predecessor as the Prime Minister of Iceland was called Halldór Asgrímsson, or Halldór Asgrím's son, while his successor was called Jóhanna Sigurdardóttir, or Dóttir, in other words, Johanna Sigurdar's daughter. In the Russian language, which is an Eastern Slavic language, the people have conventional last names, except that there's that feminine form. Usually we add an A to the masculine form. For example, the last Soviet president's and Communist Party General Secretary's name, Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev, but his late wife's name was Raisa Gorbacheva. I can't remember what Raisa's father's name was, but in any case, in the cases of men, we add either that Evich or Ovich, whatever it means, whatever the father's name is. In other words, this father's son. And then, for example, Mikhail Sergeyevich, and then his successor as the Russian leader was Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, Boris Nikolai's son Yeltsin, while Yeltsin's more famous successor is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. In other words, Vladimir's son, Putin. But, for example, if a Russian girl or woman is called Anna or Anne, then in the semi-formal way, she is addressed as, for example, Anna Sergeyevna, if her father's name happens to be Sergei. So just a funny linguistic note there for your information.